So this is what our reading strategy Pqrhms is all about. When you're taking a reading comprehension test, you simply write the letters up across the top of the passage. They'll tell you the steps to follow. Step P means make a plan and predict the genre. Well, just glancing at the title of this passage and looking at the photograph there, I can tell that this is probably going to be nonfiction. So up at the top, I write NF very quickly. Now, that prediction doesn't have to be right, but it gets my brain ready to think. I also need to make a plan. I don't want to read the entire passage without stopping to check my comprehension, so I need to chunk the passage up into smaller pieces, or parts. This might be by paragraph, or I might be able to combine very small paragraphs together. Looking at this paragraph right here, it is pretty huge, so I'm going to leave that paragraph as just one part. This paragraph as well is pretty big, but these two I think I might be able to put together. There's no wrong way to make a plan. It depends on how you like to read a passage, but you want to make sure that you don't read too big of a chunk before you stop and check your thinking. This passage continues on to the back of the page, and here again I have a pretty short paragraph, so I'm going to put this paragraph together with this one, and then this short paragraph together with this one, and then I'll be done with my passage. So that's step P. I can cross it off. Now I'm on to Q, which means read the questions. I want to know what the questions ask before I start reading so I know what to look for while I read. Number 1 says, Harriet Tubman is best known for being a conductor in the Underground Railroad. She is also known as the first woman in American history to blank. So the key words in the question, I think, would be conductor, Underground Railroad, and definitely first woman in American history. I'm going to be paying attention when I get to information about that in the passage. Number 2 says, why did Tubman decide to help the Union Army? So again, I underline key words in the question. During this time, how did the Confederate Army make torpedoes? So I need to be paying attention for number 3. When I see that word torpedoes, I need to figure out how they made them. Number 4, other than the library and the internet, how did Tom Allen gather information about Harriet Tubman? So when I read about Tom Allen gathering information, I really need to perk my ears up. But something other than the library or the internet. And number 5 says, in the last paragraph, why does the author tell about Tubman's size and illness? And it's a why author question, so I need to be thinking about what the author is really trying to say to me there. So that's all you have to do for step Q. We're already on to our third step. And really, R, H, and M all go together. I'm going to read the passage, highlight or underline important information, and write my mostly abouts all at the same time. So here I go. Harriet Tubman, Civil War Spy, by Catherine Clark Fox. Harriet Tubman is well known for risking her life as a conductor in the Underground Railroad, which led escaped slaves to freedom in the North. Now that word conductor was also in the question, and so I'm going to underline it and also the meaning of the Underground Railroad. But did you know that a former slave also served as a spy for the Union during the Civil War, and was the first woman in American history to lead a military expedition? There's some important information for me. During a time when women were usually restricted to traditional roles like cooking and nursing, she did her share of these jobs. But she also worked side by side with men, says writer Tom Allen, who tells her exciting story in the National Geographic book, Harriet Tubman, Secret Agent. So now that's the first part of my passage, so I'm going to stop and make sure that I'm understanding. This part of the passage was all about how Harriet Tubman, and I'm just going to put Tubman, was an escaped slave and conductor on the Underground Railroad, so I'm going to write conductor. Your mostly abouts want to be as short and sweet as possible, really only 3 to 5 words. And then I'm also going to put first woman because there was a question about what she was the first woman to do, and so I want to be able to find that answer easily. Now I'm ready for the second part. Tubman decided to help the Union Army because she wanted freedom for all of the people who were forced into slavery, not just the few she could help by herself. And she convinced many other brave African Americans to join her as spies, even at the risk of being hanged if they were caught. So that right there tells me why she wanted to help the Union Army. So I'm going to underline that information. That part right there was all about being a spy and why she wanted to do it. So I'm just going to write spy. In one of her most dramatic and dangerous roles, Tubman helped Colonel James Montgomery plan a raid to free slaves from plantations along the Combahee, pronounced Combee. Oh, I said that wrong. I love how they tell me what it says right there. That sounds like an important word. I think I'll underline it. River in South Carolina. Early on the morning of June 1st, 1863, 3 gunboats carrying several hundred male soldiers along with Harriet Tubman set out on their mission. Tubman had gathered key information from her scouts about the Confederate positions. She knew where they were hiding along the shore. She also found out where they had placed torpedoes or barrels filled with gunpowder in the water. As the early morning fog lifted on some of the South's most important rice plantations, the Union expedition hit hard. The raiders set fire to buildings and destroyed bridges, so they couldn't be used by the Confederate Army. They also freed about 750 slaves, men, women, and children and babies, and did not lose one soldier in the attack. Wow. Now I'm done with that giant part. Before I go on to the next page, I have to write what that was mostly about. And that was all about that one specific event where she helped to free 750 slaves on June 3rd, 1863. So I'm just going to put freed slaves. Now I'm ready for the back. Harriet Tubman, page 2, Civil War Spy. Allen, who writes about this adventure and many others, got to know Tubman through the months of research he did for the book. The historic details he shares bring Tubman and many other important figures of her time to life. And here I have a photograph of real people. To gather the facts. Oh, here we go. Allen searched libraries and the internet. We knew that, and even walked in Tubman's footsteps. I went on the river just south of the area where the raid took place, he says. You are in that kind of country, she would have known, with plenty of mosquitoes and snakes, and there are still dirt roads there today, so you get the feeling of what it was like. So he really went to the river where she had that famous raid in the previous part. So right here, for this mostly about, this is how Allen researched. And the last part. Allen says his most exciting moment came when a librarian led him to written accounts by people who actually saw Tubman and the raiders in action. She was 5 feet 2 inches, 157 centimeters tall, born a slave, had a debilitating illness, and was unable to read and write. Yet, this was a tough woman who could take charge and lead men. So I think he's trying to show me right there that even though she was so small, she was still very tough. Put all that together and you get Harriet Tubman. I got to like her pretty quickly because of her strength and spirit, Allen says. So that is how, oh, I forgot to do my mostly about. I have to stop and right here, write down what that part of the passage was mostly about. So to me, that is why Allen wrote about her and why he really was intrigued by her. So I'm just going to put a big why he wrote. And there's really not a wrong mostly about, as long as it helps you make sure that you're understanding. If you don't know what to write for a mostly about, you maybe didn't understand and need to reread that certain part of the passage. So that is how you do read the passage, highlight or underline main important information, and write your mostly abouts. And so we're on to the last step, which is step S. That doesn't just mean answer the questions, that means solve them. So now I'm ready to solve. Number 1, Harriet Tubman is best known for being a conductor in the Underground Railroad. She is also known as the first woman in American history to... I'm going to get an idea in my brain. I remember back in the passage it did say that she was the first woman in American history to lead a military expedition. So let me see if my answer choices match that answer. Ride in a train. No. Meet the president. No. Lead a military expedition. I think that's it, but I'm going to check D just in case. Serve in the Revolutionary War. Definitely C is my best choice there. And I can solve that problem by going back to where I found my answer and putting a number 1 by it, because that's where I found my answer for number 1. Then I'm just going to continue on down the passage, answering the questions one at a time and solving them by finding the clues in the text. And that is how you do PQR HMS.